Welcome back. It has been a few days since we last got together to look at one of the Psalms. In this video, I have chosen a relatively short psalm, so it shouldn't take us too long to work our way through it and hopefully arrive at some meaningful application, or at least things to consider. This is Psalm 15, which some scholars refer to as an entrance liturgy for reasons that we will unpack in a few moments here. It's introduced as a Psalm of David, Mizmor LeDavid. And remember, we've talked about titles before. We actually have an entire video devoted to it, so if you've missed that, pause here, go back and rewatch that, or just hear the 10-second spiel. Basically, when it says a Psalm of David, we infer authorship. That's not necessarily the case from the Hebrew. This could be a psalm about David, to David, for David, concerning David. Robert Alter would translate this a David psalm. My doctoral supervisor would translate this composition period, David's period, and just leave it ambiguous because the connections between the Psalms and David are ambiguous at best. And this psalm in particular, because of its high concentration on ethics and instruction, poses a bit of a problem here for a David psalm, because as we know, throughout David's kingship, he wasn't exactly a guy of a high ethical standard all of the time, e.g. the Bathsheba incident. So it causes some wrestling here. Now, the reason why people call this an entrance liturgy is because of the structure of the psalm. It begins with an orienting question. The psalmist writes, "O Lord, who may abide in your tent, who may dwell on your holy hill." These are sort of code words. In the ancient Near East, it wouldn't have been coded at all. This is language for the temple, where God's presence is. And the questions are, who is able to be in God's presence? Who is able to dwell within the temple? And that shouldn't necessarily be taken literally as if one were trying to live in the temple. This is more about who can gain access to the presence of God, what type of person that is. So for some people who are attempting to wrestle with the ancient setting of the Psalms, they would say that a worshiper way back when approached the temple and would say, maybe even at the gate of the temple, "O Lord, who may abide in your tent, who may dwell on your holy hill," almost as if it's scripted. And then the attendant at the gate, perhaps a priest or someone who has the power to let people in or not, would respond with the rest of the psalm. Now, we don't know if that's the case. A lot of scholars attempt to hypothesize these settings, and actually, if you look at the content, the priest or whoever's at the gate would not be able to tell if the person who's asking for admittance actually lived up to the qualifications that he's going to unpack here, because a lot of them are internal. They're spiritual is the wrong word, but it's not necessarily something that you would know just by the relationship that you have with someone. So most people would say ditch entrance liturgy and think of this more as an instructive psalm, a didactic psalm, a teaching psalm, a psalm that is meant to have the reader reflect on who they are and the type of character that they exhibit. So let's just play this out though. You've got someone saying, what type of person can be in the presence of God? And the psalm responds to that in these ways. Those who walk blamelessly and do what is right, and those who speak the truth from their heart. That second phrase there, the one who does what is right, the noun there is tzedek. Sometimes that's translated righteousness. And I think when we hear righteousness, we go to like this morality and piety and sort of spiritual, super spiritual stuff. But really, that's a relational term. And it means that when we're in relationship with people, we do right by that relationship. We treat people fairly, and we do what is right for the sake of the relationship and for the sake of the community that we are living within. So this person is walking blamelessly. They're doing what is right with regard to the relationships that they have. They're speaking the truth from their heart. That would be a difficult thing for a priest at the gate to know with certainty. These people they also do not slander with their tongue. They don't do evil to their friends, nor take up a reproach against their neighbors, in whose eyes, the person who's gaining admittance, in their eyes, the wicked are despised. They're not fans of the wicked, but they are fans of those who fear the Lord. It says they honor them. Continues, those who stand by their oath even to their hurt. Now this is a weird phrase and it's difficult in the Hebrew and a lot of people don't quite know how to translate it. Just to give you some of the interpretive options here, Robert Alter would translate this, when he vows to his fellow man, he does not revoke it, maybe even if that's going to hurt. Or John Goldingay would say, he has sworn to bring calamity and does not change it, with the undertone of based on the relationship that one has with someone. So it's, if you've said this is how it's going to be and then someone goes against that, you don't change your mind based on the relationship that you have with the person who has made the infraction. If they're close to you, if it's a brother or someone that you have a vested interest in, you're not going to let them off the hook, so to speak. And now here you can see that it's not talking to any Joe Israelite in the ancient world. Not everyone had the opportunity to judge the people like this. And also in the next line it says, the type of person who gains admittance into the temple, they do not lend money at interest. Not everybody had money, so this is a certain demographic of people that the psalm is really addressing here. And actually, that happens a lot in the Old Testament. It's not always written for everyone. The book of Proverbs, for example, is written to elite young men who are training for leadership positions in the ancient Near East. That doesn't mean that it's not generalized wisdom that everyone can benefit from, but if you read Proverbs 1 through 9, the framework there is, hey young man, you got to understand this. And then it leads up into chapters 10 through 31. So things like that are happening a lot. Finally, it continues, these people, they don't take a bribe against the innocent. And now some people would say that this last bit here, those who do these things shall never be moved, might be said by the priest as they're like patting the person through, almost as like this refrain, if you have done these things, you shall never be moved. Again, that it's hypothetical, no one can prove it. It might be better for us to look at this as an instructive psalm or a teaching psalm. Now, the reason why I think it's worth our consideration today is not because I want you guys to get all angsty and worried and guilt-ridden about how you're stacking up here. I want to just show that within the Old Testament and within this psalm, the mindset that was fueling this sort of thought is not be ethical, period, right? It's be ethical and gain admittance into the temple. In other words, in the ancient Near East, the mindset was worship and ethics must go together. To worship and to be unethical renders the worship as relative garbage. To be ethical and not worship in the ancient world renders the ethics to be relative garbage. Those things must come together. Proof for the point would be in Isaiah chapter 1, when the word of the Lord is basically, get your sacrifices out of here because you are a people with blood on your hands. You're a people that are you don't practice justice in any sense of the term, so stop showing up and giving sacrifices. In fact, they make me sick. That is extreme language, but if we're going to consider anything from this psalm, perhaps we can assess and not just do the checklist here, but begin to wrestle with the idea that just because we follow Jesus, and just because we go to a worship experience, and just because we sing the right songs and practice the right routines and rituals, and just because we take communion, and just because we do the things, if we are not someone who's walking blamelessly and doing what is right with regard to our relationships and speaking the truth from our heart, this might not be worth a whole lot. And I think somewhere along the way, the church has deviated towards this internal, spiritual, sin-free sort of life of worship, but it's been devoid of ethics, of justice, and righteousness, and walking blamelessly. May we never be in the situation where God looks upon our worship and says, it doesn't stand in coherence to the life that you live. May we always strive to bring these two things together. May we always strive to be the type of person that's talked about in this psalm. So we're going to throw the words up on the screen and allow you a few moments just to reflect and to consider and to see where you might be led to send a text, ask for forgiveness to someone that you're in relationship with and you haven't done right by them, or perhaps just to reflect on how to bring these concepts of ethics and justice and doing what is right and worship and bringing those two things together, because all throughout the Bible, that's what we are supposed to do.